Hi, everyone. Welcome to Airspeed's LinkedIn Live. Today's webinar is called Your Sales Forecast is Lying to You. So, we're excited to get that conversation going. But while people are gathering, please drop in the chat where you're from and what you're interested in learning about today. And we'll get started in a minute or so.
I know between the three of us, Tang, we've got a little bit of the world covered, right? I'm in Boston. Tang, where are you again?
I am in New York.
New York. All right. And Alex is across the pond. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. In sunny London.
Sunny London. Excellent.
It's been very sunny, actually. Not to be very British and talk about the weather straight away, but I mean, when it's great, we have to talk about it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You never know when you're going to get it back.
Yeah. Yeah.
The next British thing is to talk about how there's no air conditioning.
Yeah. You read my mind, Tang. We don't have enough time for that, unfortunately. That would take up most of the half an hour, I think. But
yeah. And Doug, how's Boston treating you? How's the weather out there?
We have just come off about a week long, perfect sun, what seemed to be the entire day, very few clouds, no rain, beautiful temperatures, low humidity, like a perfect summer week. So we've had a really good one.
Yes, it's the same in New York. Let's take advantage of it while we can.
That's it.
Before the rain and the humidity comes back and haunts us.
And it will.
Cool. We'll get started in 30 seconds here. So let's see if anybody's in the chat announcing where they're from. Not yet. I think people are still getting their coffee and getting ready for this exciting webinar.
Wow, there you go. One's tuning in from Rio.
We have Shannon from Denver, Colorado.
we've had JC say that AC is overrated. I would challenge you to come to my flat when it's 35 degrees outside without AC and say that.
35 degrees Celsius, right, Alex?
Sorry. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit.
You're probably running close to 100 at that point, I bet. 5 or 100 Fahrenheit.
I'm trying to check attendance right now to see how many folks we got and see if we could get started. We have Cam from Dallas joining us. Thank you, Cam. All right, I think that's enough time and we could get started. So welcome everyone to Airspeed's LinkedIn Live. Today's session is called Your Sales Forecast is Lying to You. So I wanted to open up with a scenario that everyone's familiar with. Oh, by the way, I'm Tang Nguyen. I'm VP of Sales at Airspeed. But I wanted to open up with a scenario that everyone is familiar with. You're in the final weeks of the quarter. Your Salesforce commit is good to go. The forecast is ready to go. The CRO feels good. The VPs feel good. The managers have inspected all the deals, and we've already forecasted it to the CEO, who has then forecasted it to the board. And then in the last couple of weeks, 4 deals slip. So everyone acknowledges that slipping deals and missing your forecast is just not a good thing. And 1 or 2 quarters of this may or may not be acceptable, but accepting this as a repeatable behavior or a pattern it's just very confidence damaging for the company, for the CRO, and there's a lot of like things that the board thinks about with respect to like, hey, do these guys really know their business? So the forecast is important and it matters. I think obviously at the end of the quarter, you'll do a post mortem about what went wrong with those four deals that slipped, right? There, when you do the post mortem, there's going to be obvious signals that seemed obvious. The economic buyer wasn't engaged. Critical meetings were pushed. The legal red lines didn't even start, nor did the security review. Email and text volume slowed and decreased. And ultimately, these are signals that were in your CRM or somewhere available to you, but you're really reliant on what your account executive, your sales reps are saying, right? And so that reliance has been like part of the forecasting process for ages, right? But it's time to really understand not only what the AE is saying, but what the customer behavior is actually telling you. This is why this webinar is called Your Sales Forecast is Lying to You. And let's be honest, the AEs are not intentionally lying or dishonest, but there's some human subjectivity in the way we forecast, right? The way we capture and report data, there's many elements of human judgment and, like I said, subjectivity. We want to do forecasts in an objective way to understand what the customer is doing, what the customer is saying, and really analyze that behavior. Today, Doug May and I will unpack where that gap comes from, and we know that it's not purely a spreadsheet mechanics thing. But again, a lot of it has to do with the human process, the human judgment, and the many chains of forecasting go through. Like, how does the rep's opinion become the manager's opinion that becomes the CRO's call and ultimately presented to the board? That process is broken, and today we examine where it breaks and how we could fix this. But I want to start with some introductions. I want to start with my colleague, Alex, who is based out of London, and he's on our engineering team, and he's done a lot of great work on our forecasting module. Alex, say hi, please.
Yeah, thank you, Tang. I think you pretty much hit it on the head there. Yeah, I'm a product engineer at Airspeed. I've been in software engineering for about, it must be about 10 years now. And yeah, I've been working mostly on the forecasting feature in Airspeed. And I think we've got a really good starting point of the feature, but there's so much more that we can do. So yeah, really excited to be here and to get into the details with you and Doug.
Thanks. The headliner of this conversation is Doug May. Doug is a tech luminary out of Boston, and he has an impressive 30-year career. Like, he's had very senior roles in all parts of the sales and revenue organization. Recently, he was an SVP at Harness, but he's also worked at Datadog, Databricks, Splunk, SAS, BMC, and the list goes on. So Doug is the perfect person to dissect all things forecasting and really impart a lot of good knowledge on us. And today, Doug heads up Value Sherpas. Doug, do you want to say a quick hi and talk about what you're doing today?
Yeah, it's great to be here, Tang. Thanks so much, Alex, as well. So happy to join you guys. Listen, 3 decades in a career supporting go-to-market. I was a rep. I was a sales leader. I sat in the CRO seat. And then the last 15 years or so, I sat in the seat next to some of the best CROs from Splunk, Databricks, Datadog, and Harness. And yet this problem has sort of continued to fester, if you will, over the years. It's not any better than it was 15 years ago, 30 years ago even, because every sales leader has spreadsheets that they download their data into, make notes in, and nobody can see. What I'm doing now that I've sort of put the operator side of my career to the side, is I'm helping companies who are in the growth stage really put in place the right processes, people, technology, and in doing that, helping them really take advantage of the opportunities they have in their market to grow as fast as possible. We know that revenue growth will fuel valuation, and all of those things are wonderful for technology companies. And so that's a big part of what I'm doing now, and excited to be here with you guys today.
Thank you, Doug. And a shout out to Doug. Every time I talk to Doug, I learn something new. He has so much wisdom and experience. So thank you, Doug, for all your advice and guidance. So by the end of this conversation, we want you to leave with three things. We want you to think about, is there a sharper way you can interrogate your own forecast? The second thing is, do you understand where your reporting chain falls apart and distorts the number? It's like a game of telephone, so you want to close those gaps. And finally, we really want you to think about how you judge deals based on customer signals and not internal optimism. Okay, so if during the next forecast you have better questions, there's less theater and fewer surprises, then we will have done our job. All right, so as we go along this conversation, drop your questions into the Q&A. We'll try to get to it at the end of the session. If we're not able to, we'll follow up and answer some of the questions in our follow-up. And so for today, the agenda is basically, I'll have a conversation with Doug. Again, I want to glean on his 30 years of knowledge about all things forecasting. Then I'm going to do a very brief presentation on what Airspeed is and how we think about forecasting. And then my colleague Alex will do a demo of some of the agents within Airspeed, and then we'll wrap it up at that point. So just know that when I do my presentation at the end, we have a promotion going on. We'd love for you to take a look at an Airspeed demo or try out Airspeed. And we have a special promotion if you stick around for the middle of the conversation. All right, let's kick it off. Doug, I want to push it over to you. Let's just start at a very high level. Why is forecasting so important?
Well, it's a great question. As a rep, and I think originally in my early days of being a sales leader, I thought forecasting was, a way to hold the sales team accountable. Let's make sure they do what they say they're going to do. What I learned a little bit later in my career is the company is making investment decisions based upon the performance of the sales team. I learned this really, really well from Dave Conti, the CFO at Splunk, who's now CFO at Databricks. And what he said is if the sales team is conservative on the forecast, they will not lean in and hire the resources needed. That's more developers to develop the product. That's more legal people to review contracts faster for sales. It's more SEs to support the sales organization. And so once I understood that the forecast actually is directly tied to how the company will feel about making investments, that's when I knew I had a greater responsibility as a sales leader. And in that, it meant that accuracy becomes really, really important. You don't want to under forecast because now we're not going to invest in the resources. Then you over deliver. Yes, people will high five you. You'll be the hero at the end of the quarter. But at the end of the day, you missed the opportunity that you could have had some additional resources in place. Likewise, it's just as bad to forecast over, get a little extra confident in the quarter and call too high because now we make investments. If you don't deliver against those investments, I know a bunch of companies that are running between 50 and $400 million in revenue, that when that happens, they stop hiring. They literally stop hiring. All of these things impact the growth, the momentum of the company, and ultimately the valuation. So, forecasting is really, really critical. The last reason why it's so important if you're a CRO is, it comes down to your job. You may be a great recruiter, you may drive great sales process, but if you can't forecast, you're not going to be in that seat too long. So I think there's a lot of things that make it critical to operating, and even for first line managers, really, really important.
There was a lot of very serious consequences in what you said: hiring, losing your job, the right valuation. So it's a really good perspective because that's what CROs think about. That's what boards think about. That's what CEOs think about. But the average rep is not thinking on those levels. So that's really good insight. We're going to get more into like the relationship with the CEO and the board in a later segment. So hold some of your thoughts there. we realized that there's some gaps in the way we forecast, right? Um, Talk a little bit about where some of the current tools today fall short in uncovering those gaps or just getting you an accurate forecast.
Yeah, I think, by and large, forecasting tools have evolved over the years to effectively be glorified spreadsheets. They do the math for you. If you're a second, third, fourth line sales leader, and you've got, your 40, 50, 80 salespeople in the organization, it would be hard for you to manually maintain a spreadsheet to roll all that stuff up and make a call. So the tools facilitate that. But beyond that, there's really no intelligence that comes along with that forecast. So you have to drive the cadence of forecast reviews. So if you're the CRO, then your leadership team, then that leadership team with their leadership team, and down to the reps. And what you end up having is the tool reflects opinion that is layered on opinion, on opinion, on opinion, if you will. So I think you said the telephone game is a good analogy. It's not that it goes from one person to another. It's that there's gaps in information. And, well, I talked to so and so, and they said the champion confirmed that they'll get this opportunity closed in time. And then the rep might say, well, no, that didn't really happen. I talked to this other person who said that. And then all that data goes up. And, the other thing that happens beyond all these forecast calls in an effort to try to, flush out what's really happening in an opportunity is that things they just get missed. And so now you're left as a head of sales making a judgment call. And now you have to make your judgment call about the people. The people in your organization, do I trust them? Do they follow the process well? Do I think they're over their skis right now? I have to figure out a lot of things, and then I have to think about the board, right? And the CEO and what their expectations are. So it's a tough job, and the tools just don't give you the insight, which is why you have to have call after call after call after call.
Right. Thank you. And I can tell you're very passionate about this topic because you jumped into like three or four of our later segments, but this is very good information. I also have a funny story. I was at Salesforce circa 2017 to 2020, about three years, and um, honest thing was that we did our forecast on Excel spreadsheets even during that time. And I made this joke one time during a forecast. I said, I wish we had some customer relationship system where we could do our forecasting in. And that
Yeah.
joke didn't go over very well because everyone at Salesforce should be professionals at Salesforce. It should have been the best forecasting tool there is. But we were still operating on spreadsheets, which was supremely ironic. Okay. So let's move on to the next topic. And you delved into this a little bit, but we're trying to diagnose like the real problem, right? And so you mentioned the layers. I talked about the telephone game, but we're talking about missing the forecast, right? Where does it really break down? So can you delve into that a little bit further?
Yeah, I mean, anybody really close to an opportunity, like the rep has the best visuals. Now, they also have an emotional attachment to
Yeah.
the opportunity. So sometimes they see it through optimistic lenses. The first line sales manager, their manager, has the ability typically to be less emotional about the deal. So if the first line manager is very engaged in a deal, what you'll end up happening is the two of those people have the best intel on the opportunity. However, they both have the most to gain from the closing of the deal. They have the most to lose from the deal slipping or being lost.
Yeah.
So you end up finding that this is a great opportunity. Like why they have the separate spreadsheets. As a manager, I would have a separate spreadsheet because I'm going to put my notes in there, but I'm probably not sharing everything transparently up the chain because if they scrutinize it too hard, they'll either tell me that's not going to happen, they'll judge me, or frankly, my job will be at risk because maybe they'll notice that I didn't go to the economic buyer before I did the POV to get the permission. And so, there's a lot of emotional attachment to the deals. And as a result of that, there's great information between the first line manager and the rep, but that doesn't always flow up. So So as a head of sales, you have to find a way to ask the same questions 5 different times to 4 different people, talk to the SE. You're doing everything you possibly can to try to figure out what really is happening in the account, because the data and the signal, for decades just hasn't been available.
Yeah, and I think not all of us have that energy or understand to ask the right questions in multiple different ways just to get to the truth.
That's it. Yeah.
And then you also talked about emotion, and emotion is something I really want in some of my relationships, but I do not want that in my forecast. So that one piece itself is really a factor in the way you forecast, and it's probably not a positive factor. Another thing you said is as you're
It
talking,
does. It does, Tang. Just to stay on that for a second, it does vary by organization. I've been in some. In fact, at Harness, I found it to be this way. The CRO was such that he didn't want rosy pictures and
yeah,
optimization and like think. He just wanted the truth.
yeah,
And so there was no penalty to calling a number, for example, that was below your quota. There was no penalty. Of course,
yeah,
we're going to work together on why that is, and we're going to try to make it better, but there's no penalty. I think historically, over the years, I know in my career, when I worked for some people, if I forecasted below my quota, it's like your job's on the line instantly. If you missed something, your job's on the line.
yeah,
So you get really conservative, and then you also harbor all that information in nice and tight. Keep it tight so you don't give it to everybody, because you're a little bit afraid. You're afraid about the consequences of what will happen to you. So this is, I think, the challenge. And so spreadsheets don't give you all the data and the signal you need to find out what's going on. And you have to have all these conversations up and down the chain to try to extract what's really happening. And it just takes a lot of time, and it's inaccurate in the end.
yeah. And I think irrespective of where you're at in the hierarchy or their chain, like everyone has a like an emotional motivation, a political motivation. They want to create a narrative about how great they are. So there's like there's there's a potential for tainting the forecast in every single step along the way. Another funny story is, well, at Salesforce, like we did forecasts every single week, and the AEs, among the AEs, like you almost get embarrassed if you don't have anything in commit. You get embarrassed if you don't have a substantial amount of pipeline, because we celebrate the AEs that are doing well with pipeline and closing deals. So you don't want to be that AE that doesn't have 5 minutes in the forecast where you talk about your deals. And so you tend to have rose colored glasses. You tend to say, like, hey, I want to be part of this team. I want to be part of the party. So I'm going to, take some liberties with how strong this deal is. So, again, this has been happening for millions and millions of years. You can't fault people for it, but there's got to be a better way. Okay, so let's move on to the next topic, which is just, especially from your perspective, you've been in very senior leadership roles in sales. Like you spend a ton of time in your week on the pipeline and in forecast reviews. Why are you doing this, and what are you doing during that process?
Yeah, inspection is sort of like a necessary evil in this business. Pipeline reviews are all about making sure people are doing the activities, that they're actually finding new opportunities, and that they're qualifying things in and out on a regular basis. As they used to say, I think it still applies today, pipeline solves all challenges.
Yeah,
When you have 4 or 5x of your quota in pipeline, you can get very selective as a rep, and you, as a result, work on the best deals, the ones that have the strongest champions, ones that have the best executive support. The forecast calls and all the time that we spend there really comes down to, again, back to the point of just not being able to put your fingers on the truth. And so you have to get there. And so I think that's why I'm so excited for where the world is today. I've seen a lot of technology over my career, everything from the internet get introduced to, e-commerce and mobile apps and smartphones and the cloud and now AI. There is so much data available that could provide me with more context on any single deal, on any single leader's business, rep's business, and but it's so hard to bring it all together. And and so that's the big challenge today. I think that hopefully between you and Alex, you're going to show people how you solve it.
Yeah, that's a great some great color into that. Um, it's interesting because when I do forecasts with my teams and this job and some prior jobs, like as a sales leader, you set very clear definitions on what commit is, what best case is. And so you find that AEs, even though they know the definitions, they'll put things in commit that are not nearly commit worthy, if you will. So, like, for example, I would say we would talk about like a 80K deal, and that's in commit. And I would ask, well, is the economic buyer aware and engaged, right? Do we understand the signing process, the paper process? Do we know the date that it's going to close, right? And recently, all of those questions came back as, hey, we're still working on that, but I feel really good about it, right? And so that's not a commit deal, right? And so even when you have clear definitions on what commit is, people are ignoring those rules and trying to be more optimistic than they should. All right, let's move over to the last segment, which is just the interplay between VP of sales, CROs, and the board, right? So this is something that you alluded to earlier on why forecasting is so important, but give us some inside baseball on what's happening with that dynamic.
Yeah, well, just like the sales rep, the first line, second line leader are all sort of like their job is always on the line. Um, Forecast time comes and it's on the line. It's the same thing with the chief revenue officer of the organization. And so, the board, gets a plan from the company. That number is typically lower than the number that the company establishes.
Yep.
So now the CRO has got to be managing the messaging to the board to make sure that um, they have a very tight window of accuracy to hit that number. Because if they don't, the board could lose confidence. If the board loses confidence,
Yep.
then they start thinking about maybe they need someone else in the seat who can do a better job of qualifying deals, a better job of making judgment calls on the activities that are happening and drive the right, the right outcomes for the sales organization. So it's high stakes for sure. You need to know each one of the board members too so well, in what terms of what they're going to look for. So board prep is something we spend a lot of time at, because you want to make sure that you're providing the right information in the right lens in the right way to instill confidence that the CRO is the right CRO for the business, and that the business and that we're reflecting that business back to them in an accurate way. This also is a place that suffers from a lot of the lack of signal. The more signal that I could give to Carlos as CRO at Harness would make his judgment call so much easier.
Yeah.
And that's really the opportunity that is here. But it's high stakes everywhere. High stakes.
Yeah, and I imagine Carlos at Harness doesn't really appreciate a lot of opinions and emotion.
Yeah, feeling is not great around deals. Feelings are good, gut instincts are good, but you got to back it up with actions. What actions has the customer taken? To your point about like there's communication volumes that go back and forth. There's specific items that need to be discussed, like legal red lines, pricing, etc. If I know those things have happened, then I increase my confidence in an opportunity. But the only way to find that out is to have 12 conversations up and down the chain. So that's the struggle.
Yeah, and the final point I want to make on relationships with the board is that if you forecast too low, then they would be concerned about growth, whether you believe in the business, if you're a visionary thinker and you're really moving the needle on the business. If you forecast too high and you miss, then that's a whole different set of problems. And either way, if you're off plus or minus 10 to 15%, it's an indictment that you just don't understand your business. And that's the last thing you want as well. But that leads back to your comment where you're losing confidence with the board. And so, A lot of people don't understand why forecasting is supremely so important. Cool. That wraps up this part of the LinkedIn Live. I'm going to move forward to talk about. So we've talked a lot about like the process of forecasting, some of the gaps, and why it's imperfect. I want to present how Airspeed thinks about it and how we could close some of those gaps. So I'm going to do a short presentation here, and then we'll move over to Alex's demo. Give me a second here. All right, so I assume everyone can see my screen here. So the whole foundation of this is at Airspeed, we think there's a better way to do forecasting. But the first question is, what is Airspeed? Airspeed is AI native revenue execution. And what that means is that we created our entire company with the assumption that we're going to use a model. We're going to use AI. We're going to use AI to drive all of our outputs, our UI, and all the value we provide, right? And we do that through agents, right? We have agents that understand every single deal, and it understands every single deal because it it takes in and processes all your different calls, everything that's happening in your CRM, your email communications, and anything we could collect, right? Through that rich history and context, we build this memory, and that memory and context allows us to process all of the deals and find signals and gives you answers that gives you really good insights on what's going on with your deals, what's going well, what's not going well, the customer sentiment, and we process all of that information. And this is where we're really different, or we really specialize, is the execution part, right? We have all this data, we capture all these insights, we do all this AI processing around that, but then we take it to the next step where the agents actually get the work done, right? We will find the deals that are at risk, we will fix them or suggest fixes by doing follow up emails. We'll update the CRM, and we'll coach your reps on the next best move, right? So that's a system of intelligence, it's a system of um, conversational capture, but most importantly, it's a system of execution, right? And so just think about it as a chief of staff that's really smart, and it sits in every meeting, it reads everything, it remembers every decision, and it just doesn't brief you as the CRO or the CEO, but it actually drafts the email, it updates the CRM, it handles the problem for you, right? So, we could kind of isolate this on one deal for that we're looking at in this example, but imagine an AE that has 5 deals that day. He needs to be prepped on every single deal. He needs to send out an email reminder to all of his customers that a meeting is happening, and this is what the agenda is, and this is what we're going to talk about. Imagine for a CRO where he does not have the time to talk to all of his AEs or even his SVPs. He doesn't have time to inspect the like anything more than 10 or 12 big deals, right? The CRO could have Airspeed take a look at all those deals, inspect them, figure out where the red flags are, and then send out a Slack to all the AEs on what the red flags are and what they need to be doing to fix those deals. So that's Airspeed in a nutshell. All right, so moving on to the forecasting piece, right? So we've talked about this quite a bit with Doug, where a lot of forecasting is built on emotion, feeling, and there's a game of telephone happening. In every average deal, you might have, and this is just illustrative, but you might have a lot of different calls, many, many emails, your CM is updated over time, a lot of different stakeholders. So there's so many touch points and interactions. And so in this case, if you have 72 touch points over 200 deals, that's 14,000 data points per quarter. And if you can imagine during that week or a month or even a quarter, a lot of the information that's being exchanged and talked about and evaluated between an AE and their manager and that manager's manager is nowhere close to 14,000, right? You might get 5 to 10% of that, right? So how can we transition from this system where we're processing 10% of all the valuable data we have to processing all of it, right? We really want to change the way you think about forecasting and how deep you forecast and enable you to capture all of the signals. And the analogy I think about sometimes is a casino camera, that there's a casino with hundreds of cameras and they're doing surveillance 24 hours a day. So there's so much data there, but you're not capturing that data. Imagine if that casino camera alerted you that there was a card counter on table 5 and that there's a security guard 5 feet away and to send that security guard, right? That's the way I think about airspeed. That's the way I think about, hey, let's have all these signals. Let's distill it down into the most important pieces and let's action on that right away. So I want to take an example deal here where we have Acme Corporation and it's a 120K deal. Hold on. And basically, we have it in the negotiation stage. And during your forecast call, the rep says, "Hey, we got a verbal yes, and the paperwork is in motion." So a lot of times, the A would forecast this as commit. The sales manager might ask more questions. They may not ask the right questions. But with airspeed, what we're really trying to do is get the real signal and get the real evidence behind this, right? So what airspeed is really capturing is that the date has been the close date has been pushed 3 times or 4 times here. The economic buyer has been silent for 30 or 40 days. Legal has not started. And we hear from the call recordings that our champion has said, I need to check internally on the final steps, which is a clear indication that there's not alignment and they're not a clear decision maker, right? So on the left side, we have this 120K deal that's in commit. And in the middle, we're hearing a different story. And with airspeed forecasting, we want to assign a probability, right? Through our orchestration and harness above the model, we are doing a lot of data processing, a lot of sentiment analysis, and we're coming to a probability on this one deal of 32%, right? And this is the chief of staff that is not tied to the deal. They're not emotional. They're more analytical. And they're saying, hey, we really need to take a closer look at this situation. All right. So lots to think about here, but we feel really good that this is the way you should be forecasting versus the way we've been forecasting. All right. And the last slide is we really want to engage with you all. We really want you to talk to some of our AEs that are very low pressure. We want you to see a demo. So with that in mind, hopefully you took something from this webinar, and we could give you 2 months free of Airspeed if you switch to Airspeed. And we just want to start with a consultation. So there's a landing page on there. It's very small here. It's goairspeed.com/switch. So go there, fill out a form, and talk to us. All right. That is my presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Tang. Yeah, that was really interesting. And I think your slides perfectly match the demo. So thanks for setting me up nicely there. Yeah, so I'm just going to spend a few minutes now, as Tang said, just going over the platform and kind of showing how we have started to solve all of those problems that Doug and Tang have just gone over, and how do we best utilize all of that unstructured data, but really rich data that we have in Airspeed and how do we help you make the correct decisions when it comes around forecasting, whether you're an AE, whether you're a first line sales manager, or you're the VP of sales or CRO. And there's a couple of different stories that I just want to quickly run through on the platform. So I will share my screen and we'll get right to it. So hopefully you can see that. And we'll start here on the homepage of our platform. This is our demo environment. And really our forecasting story starts at the bottom level, right? So we're talking about how important it is for forecasts to be accurate. It's pretty obvious. Forecasts are roll-ups right from the start, right from the AE's call of what they're going to bring in that quarter. And so it's so important to get that accuracy right from the beginning. So let's go over here into our deals page and quickly show you. So this is looking at our current pipeline for this user. And if we go over here and start to submit our forecast, there's a couple of interesting things that we can see here. So we can see for this user that I'm logged in as, we've got a couple of deals that are closing. And we see a pretty self-explanatory chart of how it's looking. So I've got 60K here in commit. Hopefully this is big enough and you guys can see it on the stream. We've got a 50K in commit and our pipeline is looking pretty healthy at 455K. But it's not telling the whole story, and I probably don't want to submit this number directly as my forecast, right? What we can actually do is, as Tang alluded to in his slides, is our agents are listening to every single call, every email, every Slack message from the deal rooms, and they can look at all of these signals and actually really accurately predict how likely this deal is to close within the quarter. But not just give us a score, right? Not just give us an arbitrary number, but can actually point to real evidence from all of that communication, all that information as to where that number has come from. And this then leads us into, well, what actions do I take to increase that number? And this is where the real power of kind of the Airspeed intelligence layer comes from, is not just giving you a final number for your commit. It's actually grounding all of this in real actionable evidence. So for example, for this user, let's have a look at the deals that I have in commit. So we've just got one deal here. I'm just going to zoom in quickly because this might be a little bit small. So this is my 60K commit deal. And as we can see, on the right-hand side, I've got my Q3 close probability. And actually, it's down at 35%, so it's not looking very good. So if we hover over this, we can see why Airspeed thinks this is 35% likely of closing in Q3. So we've had a demo on the 20th of July, which now is 8 days ago. But we're still agreeing on success criteria. And it's saying we're quite early in the sales process. The close date is July 31st, so a couple of days. So this is pretty right to be low on the probability side, right? This doesn't sound like this is actually going to close. And so from here, I might want to go forward and actually, maybe I should actually change this to be best case or a pipeline, or I might want to drop this commit number down to 40K or something, just to kind of reflect the uncertainty on that deal. And this is really helpful. And this is kind of how the rep is going to submit their forecast. And similarly for the manager roll-up, which is obviously typical in your forecasting processes, they'll get the same insights into each of these deals for their whole sales team, right? So all of the close probabilities across their sales team. And with this introspection into actually where that number's come from, you can get a good level of insight into actually those deals. But this is sort of the static forecasting UI. And I think actually where our platform really shines and kind of what Tang was alluding to before is the agentic side of it, and actually using conversational intelligence on top of all of this this data that we have underneath is where we can actually really interrogate the numbers behind our forecasts and understand not just what the CRM is telling us, but pull out all of those missing details behind the scenes. And so I just want to really quickly show you a couple of examples of how this can work. So if we head over here to our Agents tab, I'm going to jump into the first one here. And let's say that I am a sales rep and I need to submit my forecast. And my manager is like Tang. He's saying you got to be absolutely bang on with these numbers. I can run an agent here that's going to look across my pipeline and give me any kind of output I want. I can structure this however I want. But I just want a table that's going to go through all of my deals. And for each of those that fall underneath a certain close probability, I need to understand what I should do with that deal to make my forecast as accurate as possible. So let's just have a quick look here at the first example. So this deal here my close probability for the quarter is actually 52%. So it's not very high. But again, going back to that why and what is the problem here. So the CEO, who's the economic buyer, has actually never engaged in this deal directly. And we've got a couple of things here that have been pulled out from calls as key platform features for this fictional platform that we're selling that actually haven't been built. And they've been flagged in these calls as deal blockers. So actually, Airspeed is saying this is probably just a best case deal. And as we look through here, we can see lots of other examples where things are being pulled out of the conversational intelligence we have underneath all this and actually suggesting what we should do with these deals. So recommended categories and the flags and that kind of thing. So this is one way that a sales rep can get a little bit more detail into actually what's happening with their pipeline and better inform them when they come around to submit their forecast. But I think, especially for those of you on the call who are sales leaders and manage sales teams, you're probably aware that, well, you probably know some of your sales reps who might not want to do this, and they'll maybe have happy ears or they'll be sandbagging and might not be true to to what the agent is actually saying. And so we can kind of do this similar thing here, but for, let's say, first line sale managers. So again, I'm looking after a team of AEs, and it's come around to my weekly forecast meeting. And I want to look at all of the deals that my team have submitted by category against the quota and attainment and pipeline coverage. But I don't just want to look at the numbers, and I can look at that in the CRM. I want to know all of the signals that my reps have missed or not reported to me. So it might be things that they have just completely missed from all of the conversations they've had. Or maybe they have not told me about something. And again, I want to ground this in real evidence, not just inferring it from some data. So let's scroll down here, and we're going past some more deep dives into the deals. But what I really want to show you here is this signals your rep has missed. So this is, if you're looking after a team of 10 or even multiple teams of 10 AEs, you don't have the time or space to go through each deal and understand what other things these reps aren't telling me. But again, this is a really powerful way to use the Airspeed agents, is to be able to pull out these deals that are strategically important to the company or to your team and look at the things that have been missed. So for example, let's say here, Claude MCP was a hard requirement for this deal. And Billy on the call has said this is a critical requirement, and he said this on the June 29th call, but for some reason my rep has not included this in their forecast comment. So again, another quick example of how I can actually interrogate not just my pipeline, but my reps' pipeline, and find those things that aren't actually included in the forecast. So this will actually look at all of the deals in the CRM, but also the forecast that my rep have submitted as well. So that the agents have access to all of these underlying tools within the Airspeed platform. And just finally, because I know we're running a little bit long, I just want to show at sort of the top level. So let's say that I'm sort of the VP of sales. So, I'm sort of sitting in Tang's seat, and I've got a number that my team have rolled up to me. I've got to go into the board meeting and defend this commit number, right? And I want to have high confidence that when I go into that meeting, that this is the correct number, but also I know how to defend it. And again, if you're looking after lots of deals and lots of teams across regions, that can be quite difficult. And so I want to show you what was at the end of this agent run. And so we can kind of get a really nice summary of the bottom line, what you can defend. And again, it's kind of giving you an insight into actually how accurate is what my team have rolled up to me. So the submitted commit here, these are a little bit low for a VP of sales, but let's just say the submitted commit from my team has been 46. But actually the agent thinks the amount that we can confidently defend here is actually only 39. And if we scrolled up and look at the agent output, this would actually go into a bit more detail in terms of why we've got 7K at risk and why the gap is that as well. So hopefully that kind of gives a bit more insight into how you can kind of mold Airspeed agents to kind of fit your forecasting process. And I really have that extra level of interrogation and introspection into your pipeline and come out with a much more accurate commit number at the end of the day. I will hand back to Tang to wrap up. But thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Alex.
I would just add, sorry, Tang, but
No.
It's sort of you're giving more data to the sales leader, which will make their judgment call even better. That's what it's really all about. You'll never be able to predict 100% that this is coming in or not from all the signal, but the fact of the matter is they can't get the signal today. It's too cumbersome to do it. You're feeding it to them. It makes it so much easier. So, yeah.
And on top of that, they're getting the signal, but then there's a next best action or recommendation for action, and we'll kick off a Slack or email to do it for you. So lots of good stuff here. We can go on for 3 hours, but we're going to wrap it up right now. Doug, huge thanks for your participation. Alex, great demo, and thank you for the demo. And that's a wrap. Please follow up with us at goairspeed.com. Thank you, and have a great day.